Why are you feeding Mom's bones?
It happened when my husband was giving a bone treat to our pet dog. My niece suddenly pointed at that bone. My 5-year-old niece had always been a child who spoke about mysterious things. So, I thought this was just one of those instances. But the way she started trembling and turning pale wasn't something to take lightly. There's no way that could be true. As I began to investigate further, I would soon confront chilling facts. My name is Kate. I married my husband Mike 3 years ago, and we've had happy days. If there was one worry, it was our difficulty in conceiving a child. But it is said that babies come in their own time, and there's no point rushing it. The slight loneliness we felt was compensated by our dog Chad, whom we got in the meantime. And we had something to look forward to as a couple regularly.
Sorry for this again. Please take care of my daughter.
It was about taking care of my niece Juliet, who Nancy, my sister-in-law, brought along. Nancy had returned from her maternity leave a few years back, so she left Juliet with us when she worked on weekends. Juliet was an adorable girl who had grown quite fond of us, and my husband and I cherished her as if she were our own child. Juliet had a slightly peculiar ability. It might sound strange, but she was unusually perceptive. She could predict snack offerings or never lose at rock paper scissors against me. While my husband seemed unconcerned, I jokingly referred to Juliet's ability as prophecy. As for why we ended up looking after Juliet so often, that was due to my brother, Chris. My sister-in-law worked for a well-known company and earned a considerable salary. My brother, who married her, took advantage of her income and quit his job, spending more and more time at the slots. Consequently, even when Nancy worked on weekends, my brother wasn't home, leaving Juliet alone. Taking care of Juliet was fine, but if this lifestyle continued, it would be quite burdensome for my sister-in-law. I suggested discussing it with our parents several times, but she gently refused.
I appreciate your concern. But it's our problem, and I don't want to worry you. Besides, except for his love for slots, he's actually a good person who helps with chores.
She said she wasn't considering divorce because of the children. But during one such conversation, a call came from my brother, asking for money.
Nancy, I'm on a roll at the slots right now, but I'm a bit short on cash. Can you bring me some right away? I'll pay you back double.
As my carefree brother's words leaked through the phone, I felt irritated. Didn't he understand what Nancy was going through? Nancy smiled faintly, seeming a bit tired, and at that moment, Juliet, who had been playing with my husband in the distance, suddenly started rummaging through the drawers. Without being told, she took out cold medicine and brought it to Nancy.
Mom, take this medicine.
Thank you. But Mom's fine, so don't worry.
She's just a little tired. Juliet, you're so kind. Even a child could be considerate, yet my brother. At that moment, I didn't think much of it. However, the one who dropped off my niece the following weekend was my brother Chris. It was a bit surprising since it was usually my sister-in-law who brought her. Isn't this unusual? Sacrificing slots for family time? Chris replied.
Don't put it like that. Actually, Nancy caught a cold, so I want you to look after Juliet for a few days. I'm too busy going to the hospital or nursing Nancy.
Hearing that, I remembered when Juliet brought her the cold medicine. I'm worried too. Shall I go and cook dinner? Chris responded.
No, don't worry about it. Nancy herself says she'll be fine with a bit of rest.
Take this opportunity to take care of Nancy more. Okay?
Sure. I need to hurry back to take care of her, so I'll leave now.
With his ears possibly ringing, my brother hurried to leave. Juliet, who had seen that, murmured softly.
You'll lose even at slots.
Chris responded.
I said I'll take care of your mom. I'm not going today.
Despite Juliet reaching out to him, my brother left without even acknowledging her, hastily putting on his shoes. What was that attitude? While gently stroking the seemingly lonely Juliet, I scolded him in my mind. I planned to give him a piece of my mind next time, but he came again on the same day. It turned out he needed money because he couldn't afford groceries for dinner. I hope you didn't go to the slots again? Chris chuckled.
Ha ha ha, Nancy seemed calmer by noon, so it was a brief break. Anyway, can you lend me some money? She's hungry waiting for me at home.
With that, I couldn't possibly give him a lengthy lecture. Reluctantly, I handed him two $20 bills.
Thanks. I'll pay you back double for this.
You don't have to double it. Just make sure to pay it back.
Don't worry. I'll soon make a lot more.
A lot more? Is he talking about slots again? Before I could question him further, he dashed out of the door. For the next 3 days, there was no contact from my brother, and I continued to look after Juliet. I didn't think there was a problem since it was just a cold, but I was starting to get worried. Just as I was thinking of going to check on Nancy, my brother suddenly showed up without any notice. Moreover, he had shopping bags full of sweets and snacks in both hands.
I'm sorry for not contacting you. I was busy with unfamiliar nursing duties. Nancy isn't fully recovered yet, so she can't go out, but she's doing much better.
Seeing my brother laugh carefreely, I felt relieved that my sister-in-law seemed fine. That's okay, but what about these sweets?
These are a thank you for looking after Juliet this time. I'll probably need your help a bit more, so this is for that too.
Inside the bag he handed me was a lineup that looked like prizes from a slot machine. Did he go again? However, seeing Juliet's eyes sparkle beside me, I decided to let it go and handed the heavy bag to my husband. This delighted Mike, who loved sweets.
I also prepared something special.
My brother reached into the bag of sweets and pulled out something.
Tada! It's bone-shaped dog chew. Chad has been keeping Juliet company, so I bought this as a thank you.
Our beloved dog noticed the dog chew and began to run around my husband's feet excitedly.
Mike, this dog chew has great reviews. Give it to him right away.
My husband, taking the sweets out of the bag, said, "Thank you." Chad, excited by the bone-shaped chew that looked just like a real bone, eagerly bit into it. It's really popular. I didn't expect him to be so happy. While watching the playful Chad, I suddenly looked at Juliet with a smile. Then, for some reason, she turned pale and began to tremble violently. "What's wrong?" Juliet murmured.
Why? Are you letting them eat it?
Although it was barely audible, the next part was clear.
Why are you letting him eat Mom's bones?
Upon hearing this, everyone fell silent for a moment. It sounded like a joke, but my niece's expression was deadly serious. My husband asked,
"What's wrong? Juliet, do you remember something scary from the TV?"
He lifted Juliet up and tried to comfort her, but her trembling wouldn't stop. Watching her, I suddenly remembered my niece's mysterious power. Could this also be a prediction? But it seemed too eerie for that. Hey, Chris, Nancy is recovering from her cold, right?
What are you talking about? Even you? Of course, she is. Otherwise, wouldn't I stay with her?
Despite my brother's denial, his voice sounded different from usual, almost strained. Sensing that he was hiding something, I confronted him. I'm still worried, so I'll go and take care of her directly. I can make something more nutritious than you.
Nah, there's no need for that. If you catch a cold too, who will take care of Juliet?
My brother stubbornly insisted, wiping sweat from his forehead and taking a deep breath.
You see, Juliet is important to me. I want to do my best to keep her from getting sick.
He spoke passionately, but he himself wasn't taking basic precautions like wearing a mask. Would someone with such strong convictions neglect such a fundamental thing? However, before I could say anything further, he quickly ended the conversation.
It's about time to prepare dinner for Nancy, so I'll leave.
Watching him hurry away, I turned my attention to Juliet, who my husband was holding. She was still trembling slightly. Hey, Juliet, you mentioned Mom's bones earlier, right? What did you mean by that?
I don't really understand. But at that moment, I felt like Mom turned into bones.
My niece burst into tears and refused to say anything more. I'll follow my brother. Mike, please take care of Juliet, I said to my husband and rushed out of the house. Just as I left, my brother turned right. Keeping a certain distance to avoid being noticed, I followed him. But what could my brother be hiding? An affair? Or a marital dispute? None of them seemed to connect to the bones Juliet mentioned. Lost in thought, I realized my brother continued straight down the road where he should have turned. Where was he headed when their house was in the opposite direction? After about 5 minutes, we arrived at a deserted park. The swings were rusted and unusable, and my brother was meeting a man there. Even from a distance, the man looked muscular. Their conversation was too quiet to hear clearly, but my brother seemed to be flattering. I strained my ears to listen, and for a moment, I caught a snippet of their conversation. But the content was too shocking. I almost shouted and had to cover my mouth with my hand. Unable to stay put, I hurried back to my brother's house. Breathless, I arrived and used the spare key I had been given before. Then, the next moment, I felt a heavy, polluted atmosphere. No wonder, trash was scattered around, and an unpleasant smell filled the air, indicating an unventilated, unsanitary environment. Looks like taking care of her was a lie after all. Where's Nancy? I called her name at the entrance, but there was no response from inside the house. I reluctantly entered. After peeking into the living room and kitchen, I opened the door to the bedroom at the back and froze in place. There, tied up with ropes on all limbs and gagged with a muzzle, lay my sister-in-law. Nancy, are you okay? I rushed to her and untied her restraints.
Give me water.
I fetched a bottle from the fridge and handed it to her. She drank it all in one go. Terrible. My brother did this, didn't he? Despite him being my brother, I felt fear. But for now, I needed to call an ambulance because my sister-in-law was in distress. I rushed out, forgetting my phone at home. As I stood up to use the house phone, I froze the next moment. My brother, who had somehow returned, was looking at me. What's going on, Chris? Explain yourself.
I had no choice. If I didn't do this, my life would be in danger.
Is it about debts? While searching for my sister-in-law, I rummaged through the rooms. I stumbled upon a pile of overdue notices thrown on the living room table. You don't have money because you've been using it all, haven't you? The person you were talking to in the park, was it a debt collector?
You went that far? I had to make sure to check behind me.
My brother laughed without remorse. It seemed he had been deceived by an acquaintance and got involved in dubious investment schemes, accumulating substantial debts. However, in the end, it turned out to be a scam, and he was left with nothing. And so, when my brother struggled with repayment, he considered a nefarious plan. The conversation I overheard in the park a few hours ago between him and the debt collector revealed their plan to make my sister-in-law disappear and claim insurance money. But I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think my brother was such a terrible person.
I'm going through a lot too. The kid is noisy, and Nancy keeps saying I should work. So, I aim for a big turnaround, but even the person I trusted betrayed me.
But that's your own fault. Why couldn't you just work hard and support your family?
That kind of dull life doesn't suit me. My life is for me, so I can do whatever I want, right?
I was disgusted by his selfishness to the core. I couldn't believe such a man was my brother. I'm going to report this to the police. Pay for your crimes and reflect on them.
How would you report it?
My brother said, flashing the knife he had hidden behind his back.
Kate came to take care of Nancy today and is staying over. I'll let Mike know. When it comes to this, I'll have to lock you up in this room too.
Saying this, he approached the phone behind him and violently tore out its cord. Stop this nonsense, Chris. If I don't go home anytime soon, Mike will find it suspicious, won't he? It seemed he hadn't even considered that possibility. He was about to retort, but the next moment, he looked back at me with a defiant smile.
Hey, Kate, why don't we team up?
What? I was speechless at the unexpected words from my brother. But he paid no attention to my bewilderment.
Actually, I've been thinking about a perfect crime.
With a smug expression, he gleefully revealed his secret. But I couldn't shake off a sense of dread. Whenever my brother wore such a face since childhood, it always led to trouble. However, it wasn't wise to provoke him at this point. So, how do you plan to execute your perfect crime?
It's Chad.
My brother, after much teasing, unexpectedly mentioned our pet dog. Huh? Chad, our dog? What does he have to do with anything?
You saw it earlier, right? How excited he was when he bit into the bone.
The perfect crime my brother described was incredibly absurd. He planned to dispose of my sister-in-law when she died and feed her bones to our Chad to dispose of them. I was so shocked that I couldn't close my mouth. Disgusting, you actually considered that?
Yeah, don't you think it's a brilliant idea? If it works, I'll even share the insurance money with you. Kate, you want your own home, right?
But as I was about to say something, my brother's face suddenly twisted. At that moment, the doorbell rang.
Hey, don't move. Wait here quietly. If you do anything unnecessary, you won't get off easy.
Glaring at me and my sister-in-law, my brother headed towards the entrance. And the moment the key turned, the door was forcefully pushed open.
Freeze! Drop your weapons quietly.
Huh? Why?
It all happened so suddenly that I couldn't understand it. Somehow, the police came at the perfect time to apprehend my brother. Did Nancy report it?
I didn't do anything. Wasn't it Kate?
I shook my head in disbelief. As we stood there dumbfounded, one of the police officers rushed over to us.
Are you okay? An ambulance will be here soon.
Why did you come to help us? No one reported anything.
We received a report from a little girl. She said, "Help Mommy." She was about 5 years old.
Oh, that must have been Juliet. She predicted our danger. Nancy and I were relieved, while my brother, who was restrained by the police, squirmed and struggled.
Damn it, that Juliet brat ruined everything. My plan would have been perfect if not for her.
With a frustrated expression, he clenched his teeth and pounded the floor with his fist. Huh? What's perfect about it? I couldn't help but interject loudly, and my sister-in-law also shouted the same words. You know, if you get rid of the corpse, you can't show it to the doctor, and you won't even get a death certificate. Then you can't claim the insurance either, right?
And besides, if that's the case, there's no need to weaken and pretend illness in the first place. It could have been done in one go. Why bother with kidnapping?
So you're saying feed the bones to the dog until they disappear? Chad is a small dog, you know. How many years do you think it would take for him to finish eating the bones of a full-grown adult? Besides, Chad is a dog we adopted from a pet adoption event, and he's almost 10 years old now. There's no way he could eat something that hard. One after another, merciless criticisms poured out from me and my sister-in-law's mouths, leaving my brother with no room for rebuttal, tears welling up in his eyes. However, our anger was far from being appeased by this.
You? Just wandering around every day without working. Is it because mold is growing in your brain?
Yeah, whether it's a perfect crime or whatever, if you have time to think about stupid things, study common sense instead. And in the end, he finally burst into tears, raising his voice.
Damn it, you're all making fun of me.
But it can't be helped. You're really foolish.
Exactly. It's so pathetic, even for my own brother. At least reflect on your own in prison and think about your future. Well, we're all cutting ties with you, so we don't care what happens to you.
You're abandoning me. Don't say such cold things.
That's too lenient. You've been slacking off all this time, so now you'll pay the price alone. Now, officers, please take this man away. My brother continued to wail and protest as he was handcuffed and taken away in a police car. My sister-in-law soon headed to the hospital in the ambulance that arrived shortly, and she reunited with Juliet, who arrived with my husband. Thank you today. Thanks to Juliet, Mommy and I were saved. In response to my words, my niece happily nodded. My husband and I smiled, knowing that we would continue to support my sister-in-law and Juliet. Later, my brother was sentenced to prison, and my sister-in-law divorced him, demanding $50,000 in compensation and $100,000 in child support. My parents and I also cut ties with my brother, so his future, already burdened with debt, would be even tougher after his release. My husband, Chad, and I continue to live happily, occasionally taking care of our niece. Juliet, are you lonely because Mommy is at work?
Not at all. Because I'm going to be a big sister soon.
And a month later, I understood the meaning of my niece's words when I discovered a new life at the obstetrician's office. How did you like this story? Please also subscribe to our channel. See you again in the next video.